Right, everybody, it is now round 2, 2025, and now the Eastern Pact is making their offensives back at it again, trying to cripple the Western Alliance and make sure that they can't strike effectively next turn. Now, as you can see, we've got some Chinese purchases, a pretty big purchase this turn with a lot of infantry, a new anti-ship ballistic missile to replace their losses on the ones they've been firing at India, a new submarine to help contest the Pacific Seas, and 2 more airborne for further Pacific conquest. The Russians are really thinned out in Europe, but they have been making some strides to keep up to par with contesting the Atlantic, so they've got a new sub, 2 more tanks, and a bunch of infantry and an airborne to help out in their European offensive, because they have been doing pretty well. And the Caliphate actually making a decent purchase too, with 2 infantry to reinforce some territories and another MBT to hopefully go on some more offensives to get some more IPCs, because they are really lacking. So all cyber intelligence failed this turn for the Eastern Pact, and all diplomacy rolls but 1 succeeded, and that succeeding diplomatic role was for one of probably the most important states that you can get in this game, which is Indonesia. So the Chinese were able to get Indonesia, giving them all of these territories here, a total of 5 IPCs, and a frigate and these 3 infantry. Now, so not only for the units, the money, but also for one of the really important zones in this game, the Strait of Malacca right here. So as you can see with this sea zone border, when it's shaped like that, it means that if you control both sides, you can now block it. So the Indian fleet, if they really want to come out, they're going to have to sail all the way around Indonesia to get through. So that has definitely helped the Chinese out in their keeping the Indians down there and the Pacific Coalition out. So as you can see, I have set up my combats as usual to keep these games going quick. So I guess we will start up north in the Pacific. So first up, we have a small fighter sortie over Alaska. I'm going to be doing a surgical strike, which is kind of like a bombing run with these 2 Russian fighters. So basically the plan is their intended target is this infantry. A surgical strike is when fighters use half their attack to hit land forces, and usually it's unopposed, but the US has fighters, so they're going to have to do an interception roll. And that's like in other Axis and Allies games, where you roll at half your attack value. So I'll go because I'm the attacker, the defender goes, it's just 1 round of combat. So I'm hoping to maybe take off a fighter, hopefully not lose any, and get that airborne out of there, just to quell the US and Alaska. So next up, we have the submarines are on the attack again. 2 cruise missiles going for the US task force, and this Russian sub making a risky move by moving in and firing a cruise missile on that midway attack chopper. And it can do this because in this game, you can't spot a sub if it's firing into a adjacent land zone. So if this sub came into the sea zone and fired a cruise missile on this fleet, it could not do that. That would just be a normal combat. But since it's in this zone and it's firing into an adjacent zone, this fleet can't stop that from happening. Alright, over here in Southeast Asia, a lot is happening at sea, but not much on land. The Chinese are firing another cruise missile at the Indians up north, another anti-ship ballistic missile at the Indian fleet, hopefully to take off something. We have a really big helicopter and frigate sortie to try to take out these subs, and also, correction from last video, I realized that this US sub couldn't make it here, so he's just going to have to sit back with the American fleet. So all those units will be going for that Pacific Coalition sub. Here in Guam, we have 2 airborne and 2 fighters going to take Guam from the lone US infantry defending. And lastly, in the South Pacific, we have the battle to kind of get Indonesia under the thumb of the Chinese by taking out that small task force that's been sent down here to protect these waters, and we're using 3 frigates, 1 from the Russians, and 2 fighters. And as I've stated before, these ballistic missile subs are kind of a passive unit, so they don't interact with this combat. Moving along, in Africa, the Caliphate is trying to get their gain, or double their gains from last time, and hopefully doesn't go as bad as the last round that they had to deal with. So they've gone on a full offensive into the Eastern African states against the NATO and South African coalition, and they've also launched a small airborne attack to hopefully take out South Africa and eliminate the Pacific Coalition threat down here. I guess since we're here, we'll just kind of move the camera up north. So we have a Russian attack going into Greece, supported by a cruise missile. The Russian sub was able to get out of the Black Sea because they now control the Dardanelles. There is, up north, we have a Russian attack into Norway and a Russian attack onto Germany. Then over here, the Russians are trying not to give up in South America and the Atlantic. So you can see the Venezuelan frigate that went up there is going to try to take out the NATO frigate, just to hopefully, even if it's a 1-for-1, it's just another NATO ship that's getting taken down. And the Russian sub that was in the Atlantic now can't, because Russia needs like 2 units to block sea lift, so this sub can't really do much. And what it noticed is that the US moved all of its forces up north, so because there's no helicopters or frigates to try to take this thing out, it's safer down here, and it can help out in this little attack where we're sending in 2 infantry and a cruise missile to hopefully take out this MBT and get back our victory star in Venezuela. Now, fighters on supercarriers can move in or scramble into adjacent sea or land zones, but on LHDs they cannot, so this fighter can't assist in that battle. So that is all the battles that is happening right now, and I will get back to you when those battles are resolved. Alright, so combat is now complete, and I would call it a very successful turn for the Eastern Pact. So, starting up in the Northern Pacific, the 2 fighter jets that were scrambled to attack Alaska took out a fighter and an airborne at the loss of 1 fighter. For the Russians, losing a fighter isn't that great, but the fact that we took out 2 units for the price of 1 is definitely a good achievement. Down here off the coast of Hawaii, the cruise missile attack by the Russian sub failed, but the Chinese cruise missile attack was extremely successful, and they were able to take down 1 LHD along with an attack helicopter. That will hamper the US ability to take back these islands, since they only have 1 LHD capable of carrying 2 land units. Moving over here so we can kind of see everything. So the Chinese assault on Guam was extremely successful, no losses taken. The Chinese attack on the submarine in the South China Sea was also successful. The Chinese anti-ship ballistic missile took out got a target select and took out the Pacific Coalition LHD, which was a huge hit. You know, that was 10 IPCs lost, and now the Pacific Coalition can't move units on the offensive to, say, take back some of these islands down here. The Chinese fleet wiped the South Seas Squadron out, and at the loss of 1 Russian frigate. Moving along, the Caliphate was semi-successful. They took East African states by force, but they lost a fighter and airborne going for the South African coalition, which, although is empty, will probably be reinforced, and it's just another thing for this army to have to deal with. Moving up here, the Russians so you can see that the Russian advance is looking good at first, but you look at the amount of places that they don't have well defended. They were able to take out Greece this turn. Their attack up north failed. They took 2 NATO infantry for the price of 2 of their own infantry. They did take Germany back with some force. You can see that it'll definitely be a hard-pressed battle to take that back for the Allies. They're going to have to use a lot of units. And I think one of the biggest successes that happened of this turn was that the Panamanian army was able to take back Venezuela at the cost of no losses. So now, although 2 infantry and 2 territories doesn't look that bad for the Americans, the fact that the Americans are now going to have to use this LHD, keep using it here. They're going to have to probably use more ordnance. The Russians are going to probably build some stuff down here, and instead of these units going to Europe, they're probably going to have to come down here and liberate these territories. So I guess we can get into the build units phase. So we'll start with the Caliphate, since we're down here. Kind of get them all their territories to show. So just 2 infantry and an NBT. So I guess we'll rotate the camera a little bit so you can see Somalia. We're going to go with 1 infantry in Somalia to help defend that against airborne assaults. We're going to do an MBT in the Central Caliphate and a Caliphate soldier in Egypt. We're also going to take 1 infantry out of Israel, just kind of going into non-combat. And he is going to protect the Central Caliphate. Alright, now getting into Russia. So first off, I want to push my gains in Venezuela because that's going to help the Americans focus down there. So we're going to go with an infantry in Panama because we can only build 1 there, and another infantry in Venezuela. Now, one thing that I just noticed that is a very good thing for me, I had this sub that I showed you before, and building him up in Europe, I would have had to, send him all the way down, but instead, as you can see, we have that gear represents being able to build a unit other than an infantry, and since we have a port, we can build that sub. And as I said, in combat movements, we don't have any threat of US helicopters coming in anytime soon, so that'll be a good point to either use some cruise missiles down there or move them out of there as need be and get our blockade going so that the US can't receive sea lift. Or NATO can't receive sea lift from the US. Alright, getting into Europe. So this is kind of like a mix of non-combat and building units, just because it makes it a little bit easier. One of these fighters that came into this battle, he started at an airbase, so he can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and land in Amur. Actually, now that I look at it, 1, 2, 3, yeah, we're gonna keep him there. That's sorry about this. I'm trying to decide because now the U.S. airborne threat isn't as big, considering that we took out their Alaskan forces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. They could still launch an offensive here, so we're gonna put that fighter there just to block them if they want to land. So we've got another MBT, or 2 new MBTs. So we're gonna go for, let's see, we're gonna do 1 in each of the, or 2 in those territories, in the Ukraine, and then in these captured territories, we're just gonna have to put 1 infantry in and hope that NATO doesn't do a hard counter to us. And if they do, do an attack here, they're just taking forces away from the main theater of the war. Alright, I guess we'll land this fighter back on the LHD. And we do have an airborne, just to kind of push our weight around and threaten some other points of the map. and we will just throw him into the Ukraine, probably to launch some assault somewhere in Europe later on in the game. Alright, we do have a infantry down here in the Caliphate that was helping to defend. I think we're going to use the rail. We can rail 2 units, so he's going to go out of the Caliphate. So that's 1, 2, and he will go 3, 4 to Eastern Europe. And Russia has a capacity to move 6 spaces with that, so that'll help. We're going to move up our drones so that they can support any future battles. This helicopter too, it can land in Greece, but so he went 1, and now he's going to go 2, 3 to land up here in Europe. That's our strongest point to hold right now. So he'll just sit there and be defended. And that is it for Russia. They don't have a ton of units on the board right now, so. And they're mainly focused in Europe. Okay, getting up to the big boys, China. Let's get, I think, camera right here should be nice. Alright, so for China, we are going to first redistribute our units. So we've got an aircraft or fighter. These guys have to land. They have 2 spaces left. I'm pretty sure they came from here. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so they're going to fly through this little strait you can see and land. They can land in here or here. We're going to go right here in South China. Okay, we've got a bunch of helicopters that went 1. And now, so first we're going to land these fighters that were participating in Guam. They have to land on these carriers. I'm going to land one of these helicopters. So 1 went 1, 2. So they all have, I think this guy at 2, he's just going to come back to the carrier. And we're going to have 1 land in over here to defend Sumatra, and this drone is going to land back on a carrier, and the last chopper will land. Let's see, we'll just put him in Southeast Asia for now. Yeah, that should work out. All right, now I want to redistribute some units around the board. So this airborne that was on Okinawa, he is gonna go 1, 2, we're gonna put him in South China as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, he'll stay there. We have got, let's see. So we do want to reinforce Japan now that I look at it. So we do have that LHD. I'm not going on any major land offensives, so we're going to put the tanks in China because the more tanks, the better. Just those 3 units also having to contend with the aircraft the US probably won't be able to come into China anytime soon. Let's see. We do have sea lift and airlift. So we are going to, so we can't reinforce East Asia sadly because of we don't have any air bases there. We do have a seat or a naval base, but that probably won't help us out too much. So I think for the most part everybody is set. We probably want to move these Manchurian infantry. We'll can't airlift him or anything. They're stuck there. So we are going to airlift one of these guys using this airbase. He's going to go to Japan. This guy's just going to come down here, and this guy's going to go to North Korea to help defend that line. Then I think that's just about it for units across the board. We'll bring one guy back to East China just to defend those ICBMs against any airborne assaults. And now getting into place units. So we got another anti-ship ballistic missile that just kind of goes into our stockpile. Another submarine. This is... We could place him down... We could either put him in the Sea of Japan to help bulk up our fleet, but also put him all the way down there off the coast of Indonesia to give us some firepower down south. I think we'll do that so he can make attacks on the Indian fleet if need be, or go somewhere else if that ends up happening. 2 more airborne will be placed in South China. And we've got a couple of infantry, so we're gonna take one of those guys. So I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 infantry. So one's gonna be reinforcing Papua New Guinea, which has 1 IPC, so he can be built there. We're gonna go with 1 more in Okinawa to help defend that line. Then 2 in Manchuria. And finally, with the last guy, he is going to go down here into Southeast Asia to keep that under wraps from the Indians. Alright, and that should be it for all of our combat, non-combat, and everything. So, like I said, a very successful round for the Eastern Pact, and if we shift our view over to the production board, or the, let's see, that's now over here, you can see the incomes have changed dramatically. The Russians, as you've seen, scooped up a ton of territory for NATO. The Chinese are now outproducing the Americans by a long shot, and the Caliphate is almost to 20 now, so that'll probably help them out in the long run. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys again in the Allied counterattack.